Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. Not quite the last day of September. I guess that would be tomorrow. We close out September and close out the fiscal year on the federal government. So that gives us, today and tomorrow to get a continuing resolution agreed to, passed in both houses. I think the House has taken care of their work. The Senate has to take care of theirs. And off to the president, who has to, pretend to scribble on it. Maybe he remembers once he comes in the room that he's supposed to sign the thing. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he refuses. I don't know. Could be anything. He could decide to do anything. He could decide to shut the government down at the last minute and just insist that even though the only thing that needed to be done to keep the government open was for him to sign the paper in front of him, he refuses to do it, and yet it is somehow Democrats' fault. You never know what he's going to come up with, unless I've just told you what he's going to come up with. That's entirely possible. We'll sit around and watch and see how it goes. Today there will be a debate tonight, apparently, and I don't know what that means. I'm supposed to watch the thing or whatever. Here's what we'll do. We'll have Joan McCarter in for the second half of the show, and it'll be her job, probably, to watch the debate. It usually is. It falls to her. It's very unfortunate. Sometimes she actually enjoys it, other times not. And sometimes, lately, it hasn't ended up being her job after all. But she will come on and tell us who we are supposed to feel sorry for, whose job it actually is tonight to sit there and, it's not terribly difficult. You put up open threads for people to comment on, and that's probably the best debate coverage you can get, honestly, is just throwing it open to all of you to talk about what happened, what you think it means. Daily Co's Radio is live now. I am informed all the way from Portland, Maine, thanks to Bill, who lives there full-time, 100%. I don't know if you know that. He's known as Bill in Portland, Maine, and it's largely because that's where he is. Also, that's what his parents called him. I don't know if hey, Bill, did they ever come around to calling you Bill in Portland, Maine? That would probably be pretty awkward for the parents. But anyway, Daily Co's Radio is live now. It's debate day, that's true. And Kagro, me, David Waldman, sincerely hopes President Trump doesn't find tonight's event in Ohio too taxing. Ha ha ha. And an extra ha, just to be sure. He doesn't find anything too taxing. That's the good news, and don't worry about it. As we learned in the debates last time around, if he were to pay taxes, that means you, personally, would have squandered it anyway. Not like him, who spent it on gold toilets. That's not squandering. There's another word for it. Anyway, that's up tonight, and let's see. For instance, others dealing with the fact that it's happening tonight include Politico, and they're doing pretty much what you expect them to do. But they may have a point in this one. It's interesting. I don't know how seriously to take it. But he does come around to explaining himself. Ryan Lizza over at Politico writes under the headline of Trump, not Biden, is being underestimated going into the debate. There's the Coke can. Fantastic. We like to feature that each day. Subheader here says, watching his 2015 and 2016 debate performances is a mind-boggling experience, knowing how it turned out in the end. And it's an interesting perspective on things. And Laura Clausen, writing on the front page just now, has a similar perspective, I think, though they come at it from different headlines. We'll put it to you this way. Here's how I do think the approach may, in fact, be similar from my skimming of what's in Politico. Politico's headline, again, Trump, not Biden, is being underestimated going into the debate. Watching his performances, mind-boggling experience, but of course cast in light of this may be better than you think for Trump. Headline on what I think is the same story, essentially, over at Daily Kos, is Biden has to answer a key question in first debate with Trump. How do you deal with serial lying? And the answer is don't put any milk in it. I don't know. I guess if your Rice Krispies are lying to you in the morning, It's not fun to hear snap, crackle, pop, and don't put any milk into it, and that'll keep them quiet. All right, at Politico, Ryan Lizza approaches things this way. In 2016, during one of her first prep sessions for the presidential debate with Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton listened to a litany of attacks from Philippe Reines, a longtime aide who was playing the role of Trump and tormenting her with zingers about taxes, jobs, and immigration. Hillary had never created 100,000 jobs as Trump had. I guess it's italicized, so I guess that's one of the hits. Trump's tax plan was endorsed by Larry Kudlow, one of the greatest economists of all time. I know, stop laughing. You can't have a country if you don't have a real border. Clinton sat down, chastened. This was not going to be easy. That's a devastating argument, she said. I have not created 100,000 jobs, and maybe nobody knows who Larry Kudlow is, but he's telling you he's the expert. And I guess this is where it begins to dawn on her and everybody else. She immediately and throughout saw the power of the 100,000 job argument. It was a lie, but she saw the power of it, Reines said recently in an interview, and how it helped Trump steamroll over 17 non-business people in the Republican primaries. Although Carly Fiorina, wasn't her claim to fame being a business person? I don't know. After watching hours of Trump's debates from 2015 and 2016, what comes across in hindsight is that he had an underappreciated style, strategy, and message. And those are generous terms for what he had, really, but I don't know how else you classify them. He was not the Donald Trump of Twitter, where he launches his crudest attacks. He was not the Donald Trump of MAGA rallies, where he feeds off the crowd and plays a role that is a mix of demagogue, right-wing pundit, and entertainer. The matchup with Biden will be much different. Trump is an unpopular incumbent with a record to defend. He no longer has a clear message, as clear a message as he did in 2016. Biden has the benefit of 4 years extra to study Trump. But the controversial wisdom about Trump arriving in Cleveland Tuesday as a manic and extremely, Trumpy debater could be wrong. Trump won the Republican nomination partly on the strength of his debate appearances. I guess you couldn't say that. There's a way you can approach that. And while post-debate polls were generally favorable to Hillary in 2016, Trump's 3 general election debates were crucial to his victory. Maybe everything is different this year, but the debates offer the best and last opportunity for Trump to turn around the race. Section 1, though, gets at the heart of what the strategy, if it is one, has. Attention at all costs. You see, watching the first Republican presidential primary debates of the 2016 campaign with the benefit of experiencing Trump on the national stage for 5 years is revelatory. Most of the other Republican candidates share an understanding of what conservatism means and what presidential candidates should look and sound like. The media moderators share an understanding of what a candidate can and can't get away with. Since we know the ending, watching Jeb Bush talk about his optimistic vision for America, or seeing Chris Wallace react indignantly when Trump bulldozes through a question with a flurry of bombast and nonsense, can be painful. Watching these old clips now, it's mind-boggling how easy it was for Trump to play the media and his opponents. The tone was set at the very first debate on August 6, 2015 in Cleveland. I can't believe it was that long ago. Fox's Bret Baier asks if any of the 10 candidates on stage is not willing to pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee or promise not to mount an independent campaign in the fall, something Trump had flirted with publicly. Trump, standing in the center because he's already at the top of the polls, is wearing his candidate uniform of blue suit and extra long shiny red tie. He looks around, sees that nobody else is raising his hand, and puts his own in the air. The crowd loudly boos him, and Trump responds with an exaggerated shrug and outstretched palms. Naturally, the moderators, channeling the outrage of the Republican audience, ignore the other 9 candidates and press Trump on his supposed heresy. To be clear, you're standing on a Republican primary debate stage, Baier says. The camera zooms in on Trump and his face fills the screen, as it usually does. I mean, it's a very large and round face. I fully understand, Trump interjects, and he did. It was everyone else in politics and media who didn't. At the end of the first debate, Bush wags his finger at Trump's obnoxious tone. "We don't have time for tone," Trump responds. Trump kept himself as the center of attention in the next 11 debates, aside from a couple days in November of 2015. He was the polling leader for the rest of the primary. Moderators would challenge him by noting what, quote, experts say, or asking him to, quote, share your proof with the American people about some absurd claim, and Trump would talk about why we, quote, we don't win anymore, or how the press is, quote, a very dishonest lot. Whenever Trump would be challenged about his personal criticisms of other candidates, he would escalate. "I never attacked him on his looks, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter there," he said about Rand Paul in the second debate. The purpose was to remain the focus at all costs, and it worked. The rules said that if another candidate mentioned you, then you got to respond. Trump made sure he was mentioned. At the third debate in October, an exasperated Mike Huckabee was asked if Trump had the character to be president. "As few questions as I've got, the last one I need is to give him some more time," he said. Someone was finally onto the strategy, but it was too late. He lies. Well, that's the strategy. We know that. When Jeb Bush accurately says Trump lobbied him on casino gambling in Florida, Trump admonishes, "Don't make things up." He cites unnamed experts endorsing his views. "Some of the greatest scholars agree with me." He tells Carly Fiorina about birthright citizenship. He brags about his scandals. "I used the laws of this country to my benefit," he said, of his company's multiple bankruptcies. "I'm sorry." Next section here now, a more reserved Trump. By the general election, Trump had most of the Republican Party behind him, and his ragtag operation had some operatives with traditional campaign experience guiding it, including Kellyanne Conway, who convinced him to tone things down. If watching the Republican primary debates of 2015 and 16 is jarring for how effective Trump was at using his shock jock shtick to dominate a political campaign, watching the 2016 general election debates is jarring for how relatively restrained Trump could be. Simply commanding the spotlight, crucial in a 17-candidate field, was no longer a wise strategy in a two-person race, but watching the debates knowing that Trump would defeat Clinton by winning over white working-class voters reveals Trump to be cannier in his messaging than he was given credit for at the time. The issues that flummoxed Clinton during the debate prep proved to be deadly. In 2016, he had his message killers: immigration, trade, Obamacare, and corruption in Washington, Raines said. In the early moments of the first debate, which was the most watched period of the first all three matchups, the two candidates outlined their economic visions. Clinton was cogent and talked about a series of specific policies like raising the minimum wage, paid family leave, affordable child care, and debt-free college. There was a dash of populism when she talked about having the wealthy pay their fair share and closing corporate loopholes. It all seems so clear now, but it's like watching a horror movie where you can't believe another victim is going to fall prey to the same mistakes that Rubio and Jeb made when they were drowned in the lake by Trump. When it's Trump's turn to talk about the economy, he launches into a simplistic riff about the world taking advantage of Americans. Our jobs are fleeing the country, Trump begins. He blames it all on Mexico and China and the other foreign countries using America as a piggy bank to rebuild their own countries. The Obama administration's refusal to, quote, to fight them is the problem. On the issues that he did have details about, they were skeletal, like his promise to cut corporate tax rates from 35% to 15%, which he said would be an explosive, quote, job creator and, quote, be a beautiful thing to watch, which, if it's a graded debate, like for school competition, he loses, but it's not that. You get the idea. Clinton was cerebral and hemmed in only by proposing things she genuinely believed were possible to pass into law as president. Trump was visceral and unencumbered by any sense of what might work or what was possible to get through Congress. There were sporadic outbursts from Trump through the three debates that had nothing to do with his four pillars. He threatened to jail Clinton during the second debate in the wake of the release of the Access Hollywood tape. When it seemed his candidacy might implode, he made a spectacle of the evening by inviting to the event several women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault or sexual harassment. But what comes across watching these events back to back is the power of Trump's populism and demagoguery and the relative restraint he showed compared to what we have seen on his Twitter feed and in his press conferences for much of this year. Raines, who has studied Trump's debating style as much as anyone, agreed with that assessment. He had his 4 pillars and a well-honed attack on Hillary, he said. He spent nominal time defending himself, even in the face of the most egregious incidents like Access Hollywood. There was a Trump formula for almost every question a moderator posed that might be uncomfortable for him. In the first debate, Lester Holt asked Trump about releasing his tax returns, a topic certain to come up tonight. His response set the pattern he would use for all 3 events. "I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit," he said. "And it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released." Trump then bragged about how he made $694 million the previous year. Then he pivoted to discussing trade deficits and the political hacks negotiating our trade deals. He finished by proposing he release his tax returns, quote, "when she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted." Raines described that 3-step response that Trump patented in 2016 as word salad, weird digression, I'm great and she's terrible. There's a good case that the political dynamics of 2020 are completely different. It's always easier in American politics to run as an outsider against the establishment. Successful presidential candidates as different as Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all profited from that strategy. Trump now has the burden of trying to defend an objectively poor record on the central issue of 2020, his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. His message is not as simple and clear as it was in 2016, but it says 2020. Though it's perhaps a tad self-serving, Raines has become convinced that Trump's message was so effective in 2016 that no Democrat would have fared better than Hillary Clinton. He described some revelatory moments during debate prep when he was doing his best to inhabit the character of Trump, but all that was really coming out were the words. "What's scary is that I'm dressed like him and I have the Trump mannerisms, but I'm not crazy," he said. "I'm still Philip Raines. And when you hear me saying what he says, you see the power of it, even without any of the crazy stuff. It's why Biden or Bernie would not have beaten him." In his view, the fact that Trump has a real governing record and is unpopular, 45% job approval at best, changes everything. Clinton struggled to make the case that Trump would be the wrong person to lead the country through a crisis, and his act was still a novelty to many Americans willing to give him a chance. But Biden has the benefit of being able to ignore much of Trump's familiar histrionics and focus clearly on his record. Raines' 2 pieces of advice for Biden were, 1, not to overthink it. Trump is not that sophisticated, and to serve as a narrator of Trump's tactics for viewers at home by declaring early on what they will hear from Trump Tuesday night can't be trusted. He has to beat him to the punch, Raines said. They don't have opening statements, but I would start with, "I've served with and for 8 presidents before you, and I never thought I would say this to a president, but most of what you hear from him tonight will be false." Still, last time around, Trump learned to master and dominate the debates in the Republican primary, and he was extraordinarily effective against someone as skilled as Hillary Clinton in 3 general election debates. He shouldn't be underestimated. It would be the ultimate payoff in all of this for Jason Miller to underestimate Trump, I guess, or... So we definitely don't want to do that. Whether or not it's wise strategy to overestimate Trump, you don't want to reward Jason Miller in any possible way. Let's see. How does Laura treat it? I think, again, like I said, largely the same way, but the difference is in the headlines, which maybe explains your preference for reading the headlines at Daily Kos rather than at Politico. You're a sane person, and so's Laura, and you'll want to see things the same way. The way she puts it here, it's of course officially in the home stretch. Early voting has already started on Tuesday night. That's tonight. Donald Trump and Joe Biden will debate for the first time in what's generally agreed to be Trump's best chance to change the dynamics of the race that he's currently losing badly. Precedent is not with him. Despite Adam Nagorny's best effort to paint Trump as a debate champion, that's interesting that has happened over at the New York Times, which ran it under the headline, The Reality TV Host versus the Velvet Shiv, Trump and Biden in debates. So Ryan Lizza not alone in taking this angle this morning. But Laura presses on. Despite Nagorny's best efforts, polls show that viewers thought Hillary Clinton beat Trump in the 2016 debates. And again, that's true. Certainly on substance and in most cases on style as well. But, Trump appeals to a different demographic, let's say. But we also know that Trump will go down in the ugliest possible fashion, which is why you have to question whether anyone is seriously looking forward to this. 90 minutes of Trump lying and whining and bullying and undermining U.S. democracy, with Fox News host Chris Wallace serving as the guardrails. Trump's repeated attempts to focus attention on the idea of drug testing Biden shows what must be a significant sense of doom on his part. But again, Trump will make this as ugly and dangerous as he possibly can. And I guess you can only interpret the drug test demands, which we haven't specifically discussed, but I think you all know they're out there, are phase one of Trump's attempt to grab attention more than anything else. All right, so let's see. Biden has to be prepared for the onslaught of lies and attacks coming to the debate with a strategy for how to parry without being dragged into the mud. He did well in his 2008 and 2012 vice presidential debates, using very different strategies to take on very different opponents, and found his footing in his single one-on-one primary debate in 2020 opposite Bernie Sanders. But Trump is Trump, and it's not like preparing for a normal debate, as former Obama strategist David Axelrod put it. How do you deal with serial lying? Axelrod asked. How do you deal with the provocations? He can be exasperating. How much do you want to tangle with him on every point? How do you keep from going down rabbit holes that don't really lead anywhere? Those are big strategic decisions on which you have to figure Biden's debate preparations have focused. One decision on the campaign has hinted at is for Biden to refuse to try to counter Trump's blizzard of lies one by one. If you take on that role, you seem small, said former White House press secretary and former Biden advisor Jay Carney. But there also has to be a way to signal a big fat nope on the lies. In his interview with Trump over the summer, Wallace didn't let him off too easily, but the stakes are different now. Wallace is still a Fox News personality, and he's going to have to decide whether that outweighs his desire to be seen as a serious news guy. One thing we do know, fact checkers will have a lot to do late Tuesday night into Wednesday. And that's that. All right, well, I mean, she deals rather matter-of-factly, I think, with what's going on. Ryan Lizza basically takes the traditional media horse race view of things. Yes, it will be a flurry of lies. I mean, Laura just comes straight to the point. This is what they're going to have, and the question is how to deal with it. Ryan Lizza, as a mainstream traditional news reporter, says he will lie like crazy. The question is, will it work? So the two opposing approaches laid out very clearly there, I think. And it's pretty much to be expected. It should, I think we all knew it was going to go this way. All right, let's see. The Times has another round of Trump taxes stories out. And we didn't even finish wading through the first day's dose of it, though we got, I think, largely through the most interesting parts that I thought were there, just trying to explain the dynamics of what he was doing and how he was getting away with it. And I'm still a little bit puzzled. Like, I still, you would think that as a long-term strategy, losing millions of dollars and being okay with it because you could just write it off as business losses. I mean, eventually, you got to be making some money from somewhere. And there were, I guess, a few places where profit was being generated. But I guess that's all there is to it. He play acts at being a billionaire. The goal here is, to be seen as an extraordinarily wealthy person. And I guess all it takes when the definition in his mind, and I guess apparently the minds of everybody else concerned with his financial status, is how much money does it take to look like a billionaire? And I guess if you really break it down, it's easier to understand because normally you would think the answer is $1 billion. That's how much it takes to look like a billionaire. Because what does a billionaire look like? Well, to most of us, and with most billionaires, it's probably just appearing in the newspaper with the word billionaire next to your name. I mean, I don't know how much money Jeff Bezos really has. I don't know how much money, I don't know, pick up Bill Gates really has. Or certainly any of the lesser known billionaires. I don't know how much, except whatever the newspaper that tells me that they're a billionaire says they have. I don't see it. I don't get to look through their bank accounts. I don't see a pile of gold anywhere. And then maybe you look for other outside indicators. Do they have a private jet? Do they have a gold toilet? I don't know. I mean, ordinarily, I guess you wouldn't include a gold toilet in anybody's billionaire assessment. But Trump just basically figured out you just need enough access to cash, whether it's loaned, stolen, borrowed, earned, whatever, to make it look like you don't care about how much things cost and you just want outrageous, gauche things. The rest of the billionaire world just doesn't buy things like that. And I guess maybe that's because they don't care to prove it. They know how much money they have. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I'm trying to sort of decide how to proceed from here, but I found maybe we want to dive back into the taxes story because they're long, extraordinarily long. I don't know that we'll be able to finish them, of course, because we'll be talking to Joan later on, but I don't know, they're somewhat fascinating. How long is this second installment here? I should take a look and see if it's as lengthy as the first, and it looks to be. But I do feel like we want to kind of dive into something. So maybe we can at the very least finish off the first round, the first story, first installment that I guess came, Sunday night and into Monday. And I think we left off as we were figuring out what Trump was doing tax-wise, and how he was just, as we were explaining on our way into the break, spending just enough money to make it look like, for people who would have no idea how much $1 billion really is, and that would include me, and most of us don't have a real concept of that. What would it look like if somebody had $1 billion, even if they don't have $1 billion, and how much would that cost? And it seems like his whole life was a desperate scramble for grabbing onto the couple $100 million that it takes to maintain that lifestyle. I don't think it takes that much money to put on that lifestyle, but he does need to shuffle money around and occasionally pay things off or make some sort of down payment on things in order to stay alive, and then to stay afloat financially. A lot of the act, I think, is also aimed at convincing people who were loaning him money that it was worth loaning him money. And it's also, I guess this is amazing too. It's just as easy, and I guess you can use the same tactics to fool somebody like you and me who don't have any idea what $1 billion is really like into believing he has $1 billion. Only someone with $1 billion to burn would waste money on the stupid things that this idiot is buying. But at the same time, you know, for instance, well, you know, it doesn't seem like Bill Gates is wasting huge chunks of money on such stupid things. He has a gigantic house, and it's full of, I don't know what, you know, high-tech gadgetry. But that doesn't seem, well, one, I know he's got billions of dollars and he's got it covered. But beyond that, you know, I don't know what Bill Gates' plane looks like. I don't know how he decorates it. I don't know where he spends his vacation time. I don't know that about Jeff Bezos. I don't know what about Bill Gates. I don't know what about, I don't know, pick your, Mike Bloomberg, for that matter. I don't know what he does with his time. But Trump, you know all about it. And it's interesting because you might think, oh, well, the investment banker types who sometimes are billionaires themselves or certainly move in circles with extraordinarily rich people, if not all billionaires, do have some sense of what a you know, very wealthy life looks like. You know, I guess it's less from the outside for them than it is for us. But they must have realized that Trump was different and lived a different kind of life. Still, it was ostentatious and all about making shows of wealth. So while they thought that's unusual and unorthodox, and I don't know anybody else who's like that, it was very clearly aimed at showing that money was being burned on stupid things, and only a billionaire or near billionaire could do such stupid things. So despite the fact that he was the complete opposite of every wealthy person they knew, they just figured, well, he has about as much money or more as ordinary wealthy people, so they just kept lending him money. And, of course, it was extraordinarily important to his strategy of claiming tax deductions for these stupid expenditures. Part of it was business decision rule. You know, you can't penalize me for making stupid business decisions. Everybody makes those. But the other part was buying the image. My money-making enterprise, in his case, depends on maintaining the image of this lavish spending, over-the-top, gauche billionaire, and people expect it of the Trump brand, or people expect the Trump brand when they buy into one of these, either the clubs or the hotels or whatever. I don't know how you're really supposed to convey that with steaks and water, and I think I saw this morning mattresses was another line of business, but he figured out, like Martha Stewart did, really, although to a lesser degree, and I think with more understated and better taste, I guess, except she went to jail and he hasn't yet. But she discovered early on that I want this kind of lifestyle. I want the toys that go with wealth. And for her, it was houses and cooking equipment and decorating things and you know, cooking fancy crap that none of the rest of us have any time for. But what she figured out was, if I want to do these things, I do them and film them and put them on television, and then they're deductions. So if I want a house in the Hamptons, for you have to earn the money to buy the house in the Hamptons, or be able to convince a bank that you can pay the mortgage on a house in the Hamptons, and then you go ahead and do it, and then you're paying to have that. And you work hard and make bazillions of dollars because of how hard you work and how calloused your hands are and writing your name on papers over and over again. And but it costs you money and you spend it willingly. That's what work is for. For Martha Stewart, I mean, you know, she would, of course, tell you she works hard, and she's mellowed a lot since hanging out with Snoop Dogg and going to prison. Not that they went hand in hand, by the way. Snoop Dogg out of prison, her in prison. But the point here is, when she wanted to have a house in the Hamptons or wherever else, she would buy it, not because she had necessarily at that point lots of money to burn on a house in Hamptons, but that she would buy it and then decorate it, but film the decoration of it and narrate the decoration of it and say, that's a production expense for Martha Stewart Living, the TV show. Now I own it, or the company owns it, and I can make the company let me live in it part-time, or I can make the company let me rent it out on Airbnb, for that matter. But for all intents and purposes, there's now we'll say beautifully and tastefully decorated home in the Hamptons that essentially is hers, but really belongs to a corporation and was a business expense. And Trump can do the same thing, except he decorates it badly. But that's part of the brand too. So if there are toys he wants, he buys them, makes the company pay for them, and then makes the company let him use them as his own. And any money that's lost on it, well, that's just coming off the taxes. And I think at some point he, as he does with most money, blurs the line between what is personal for him and what belongs to or is attributable to the businesses. And he, it's not a publicly traded company. He can pay himself whatever salary he wants or thinks he can afford from the budget of the company, if he's paying any attention to the budget of the company. And just, like I said, blurring the lines. And any time when the company does something dumb and buys him a toy and it loses hundreds of millions of dollars, he can easily write it off against his company's taxes, but I think there are places where he blurs the line and writes it off against his personal taxes too. Remember, in all of this, we are told pretty clearly that the taxes that the Times got hold of are not his personal income taxes, but the income taxes for the various companies that make up the Trump organization. So, let's see. We left off, I think, talking about for one thing, how much money they were spending on legal representation. I remember we were talking about Alan Futterfass being by Don Jr.'s side when he was being investigated, and how much of all of the legal representation, the high-cost legal representation, was written off as an expense by the company. We were going to move into, I guess, one of the final sections here, a president and a businessman, which he's not. Let's just go right to it. Deals in countries led by strongman, tenants who have business before the federal government, and hotels and clubs that draw those seeking access or favor. Why not? We'll go right into it. In May, the chairman of a trade group representing Turkish business interests wrote to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who also, by the way, is in the news today and yesterday. We'll just note quickly in passing, Wilbur Ross, as Commerce Secretary in charge of operating the U.S. Census this year, has declared that the census is just going to stop counting people. I believe he picked the date of October 5th. He's been sued. They've gone to court. They've got a court order insisting that the census continue into late October so as to get a better count. Wilbur Ross, had some flunky announce it or whatever. I don't know the mechanism through which they made the announcement, but Wilbur Ross and the Commerce Department basically say, so a judge says it. Big deal. This is the party that threw it all away in order to win the judges that they wanted. Well, when they don't get the judges they want, when they do get the judges they want, they say judges are the ultimate power in the universe. And that's why we're throwing away everything in exchange for these judges. And they'll all tell all you liberals that you have to listen to us instead. And if they don't, then they ignore them and wait for them to die, or, have them thrown out of helicopters for all I know, and then replace them with their judges who will say what they want. So when judges rule the way they like them, they're the ultimate power in the universe. When judges rule the opposite, they ignore them. And it's not entirely clear how they're going to, or if they are going to, get away with this. But that's where we stood last night when I last saw news about the situation. But for right now, we have a Turkish group writing to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, urging support for increased trade between the U.S. and Turkey. The ultimate goal was nothing less than, quote, reorienting the U.S. supply chain away from China. It's not a bad idea. I don't know that Turkey can fulfill that role, but That's the idea. The letter was among 3 sent to cabinet secretaries by Mehmet Ali Yalçındag. I'm going to guess at this pronunciation. Yalçındag. It's Yalcin, which should be Yalçın, I think, in Turkish. Dag, which I think is like the G isn't the G. It's like more Y-ish. Yalçındag? I don't know. Well, he's chairman of the Turkey-U.S. Business Council, who noted that he had copied each one to Mr. Trump. The president needed no introduction to Mr. Yalçındag, though. The Turkish businessman helped negotiate a licensing deal in 2008 for his family's company to develop 2 Trump towers in Istanbul. 2. The tax records show the deal has earned Mr. Trump at least $13 million, far more than previously known, including more than $1 million since he entered the White House, even as his one-time associate now lobbies on behalf of Turkish interests. Mr. Yalçındag has said he remained friendly with Mr. Trump since their work together years ago, but that all communications between his trade group and the administration go through formal channels and are properly disclosed, which probably tells us that they are not. The ethical quandaries created by Trump's decision to keep his business while in the White House has been documented, but the full financial measure of his extraordinary confluence of interests, a president with a wealth of business entanglements at home and in myriad geopolitical hotspots, has remained elusive. The tax records for Mr. Trump and his hundreds of companies show precisely how much money he has received over the years and how heavily he has come to rely on leveraging his brand in ways that pose potential or direct conflicts of interest while he is president. The records also provide the first reliable window into his finances before 2014, the earliest year covered by his required annual disclosures, showing that his total profits from some projects outside the United States were larger than indicated by those limited public filings, which should pose a problem for him, really, but we don't know. Based on financial disclosures, which report much of his income in broad ranges, Trump's earnings from the Istanbul Towers could have been as low as $3.2 million. In the Philippines, where he licensed his name to Manila Tower nearly a decade ago, the low end of the range was $4.1 million, less than half of the $9.3 million he actually made. In Azerbaijan, he collected more than $5 million for the failed hotel project. How do you get $5 million for a failed project? I don't know. About twice what appeared on his public filings. It did not take long for conflicts to emerge when Trump ran for president and won. The Philippines' strongman leader, Rodrigo Duterte, chose as a special trade envoy to Washington the businessman behind the Trump Tower in Manila. In Argentina, a key person who had been involved in a Uruguayan licensing deal that earned Trump $2.3 million was appointed to a cabinet post. The president's conflicts have been most evident with Turkey, where the business community and the authoritarian government of President Erdogan have not hesitated to leverage various Trump enterprises to their advantage. When Turkish-American relations were at a low point, a Turkish business group canceled a conference at Trump's Washington hotel. 6 months later, when the two countries were on better terms, the rescheduled event was attended by Turkish government officials. Turkish Airlines also chose the Trump National Golf Club in suburban Virginia to host an event. It's not close, by the way. You really have to go out of your way to get there, to do it. More broadly, the tax records suggest other ways in which Trump's presidency has propped up his sagging bottom line. Double entendre there, I think. Monthly credit card receipts reported to the IRS by third-party card processing firms reflect the way certain of his resorts, golf courses, and hotels became favored stomping grounds, if not venues for influence trading, beginning in 2015 and continuing into his time in the White House. This is, of course, by design. You know where they're talking about. The credit card data does not reflect total revenue and is useful mainly for showing short-term ups and downs of consumer interest in a business. While two of Mr. Trump's marquee draws, the Washington Hotel in the Old Post Office and the Doral Golf Resort, are loaded with debt and continue to lose money, both have seen credit card transactions rise markedly with his political ascent. At the hotel, the monthly receipts grew from $3.7 million in December of 2016, shortly after it opened, to $5.4 million in January 2017 and $6 million by May 2018. At Doral, after Mr. Trump declared his candidacy in June of 2015, credit card revenue more than doubled to $13 million for the 3 months through August, compared with the same period the year before. One Trump enterprise that has been regularly profitable and is a persistent source of concern about ethical conflicts and national security lapses is the Mar-a-Lago Club. Profits there rose sharply after Trump declared his candidacy, as courtiers eagerly joining up brought a tenfold rise in cash from initiation fees, from $664,000 in initiation fees in 2014 to just under $6 million in 2016, even before Trump doubled the cost of initiation in January of 2017. The membership rush allowed the president to take $26 million out of the business from 2015 to 2018, nearly triple the rate at which he had paid himself in the prior 2 years. And again, if the goal is, you keep hearing these numbers, taking $6 million in at this hotel and $10 million at that one, and here $26 million at Mar-a-Lago Club, but still that's a long way from $1 billion, right? True. But if you can grab $26 million of cash here and $6 million there, how much money does it take to buy cheap spray-painted gold garbage to make it look like you're a billionaire, if that's your idea of what a billionaire might look like? Well, several million less than that is probably the answer. You can even get some real gold with the $26 million you take out of Mar-a-Lago, and that's only a fraction of what he's drawing from. Some of the largest payments from business groups or events or conferences at Mar-a-Lago and other Trump properties have come since Trump became president, the tax records show. At Doral, Trump collected a total of at least $7 million in 2015 and 16 from Bank of America, and at least $1.2 million in 2017 and 18 from a trade association representing food retailers and wholesalers. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce paid Doral at least $406,599 in 2018. Again, small numbers compared to $1 billion, but one, he doesn't really have to have $1 billion to let people, to make people believe he has $1 billion. And two, wouldn't you like to get your hands on some share of $406,599 in 2018? That's just one group paying for one event at one of your stupid properties. Beyond one-time payments for events or memberships, large corporations also pay rent for space in the few commercial buildings Trump actually owns. Walgreens, the pharmacy giant that resolved an antitrust matter, mysteriously enough, before federal regulators in 2017, pays $3.4 million a year for a lease at 40 Wall Street, a Trump-owned office building in Manhattan. Another renter at 40 Wall for $2.5 million a year is Atane Engineers, A-T-A-N-E, which changed its name in 2018 after a corruption scandal that culminated in two former top executives pleading guilty to paying bribes for city infrastructure contracts. Despite the criminal case, which landed the company on New York State's list of, quote, non-responsible entities that require a waiver to obtain state contracts, the newly christened Atane registered as an eligible federal contractor with no restrictions listed in its file. Rental income overall at 40 Wall has risen markedly from $30.5 million in 2014 to $43.2 million in 2018. The tax records show that the cost of existing leases there has risen, and at least 4 law firms appear to have moved in since Trump ran for president. In addition to buildings he owns outright, there's also the president's stake in the Vornado partnerships that control 2 valuable office towers. Those two are 1290 6th Avenue in Manhattan and 555 California Street in San Francisco. That's the one we heard about because they had the Qatar National or Sovereign Wealth Fund that bought an office there that they don't ever use. Vornado's chief executive, Stephen Roth, is a close Trump ally recently named to the White House Economic Recovery Council. Not that they were recovering. Last year, the president appointed Mr. Roth's wife, Darryl Roth, to the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees. Vornado tenants include a roster of blue-chip firms paying multi-million-dollar leases, many of whom regularly do business with, lobby, or are regulated by the federal government. Among the dozens of leases paid in 2018 to Trump's Vornado partnerships, according to his tax records, were $5.8 million from Goldman Sachs, $3.1 million from Microsoft, $32.7 million from Neuberger Berman, an investment management company, and $8.8 million from the law firm Kirkland & Ellis. Looks like maybe the last section here, the gathering storm. Threats are converging, mounting business losses, the looming IRS audit, and personally guaranteed debts are coming due. I was waiting to hear about the personal guarantee things. When Mr. Trump glided down a gilded Trump Tower escalator, that's some trick, glided down a gilded escalator, to kick off his presidential campaign in June 2015, his finances needed a jolt. His core businesses were reporting mounting losses, more than $100 million over the previous 2 years. The river of celebrity-driven income that had long buoyed them was running dry. If Mr. Trump hoped his unlikely candidacy might at least revitalize his brand, his barrage of derogatory remarks about immigrants quickly cost him two of his biggest and easiest sources of cash. Licensing deals with clothing and mattress manufacturers, that had netted him more than $30 million. NBC, his partner in Miss Universe, a source of nearly $20 million in profits, announced that it would no longer broadcast the pageant. He sold it soon after. Now his tax records make clear that he's facing a battery of threats to his businesses and his own financial well-being. Over the past decade, he appears to have filled the cash flow gaps with a series of one-shots that may not be available again. In 2012, he took out a $100 million mortgage on the commercial space in Trump Tower. He took nearly the entire amount as a payout, his records show. His company has paid more than $15 million in interest on the loan, but nothing on the principal because he's such a good businessman. The full $100 million comes due in 2022. In 2013, he withdrew $95.8 million from his Vornado partnership account. He needed to buy gold toys to make it look like he was rich, I guess. And in January of 2014, he sold $98 million in stocks and bonds, his biggest single month of sales in at least the last 2 decades. He sold $54 million in stocks and bonds in 2015 and $68.2 million in 2016. His financial disclosure, released in July, showed that he has as little as $873,000 in securities left to sell. Trump's businesses reported cash on hand of $34.7 million in 2018, down 40% from 5 years earlier. What's more, the tax records show that Trump has once again done what he says he regrets, looking back on his early 1990s meltdown, personally guaranteed hundreds of millions of dollars in loans, a decision that led his lenders to threaten to force him into personal bankruptcy. This time around, he's personally responsible for loans and other debts totaling $421 million, with most of it coming due within 4 years. Should he win re-election, his lenders could be placed in the unprecedented position of weighing whether to foreclose on a sitting president. There is, however, a tax benefit for Mr. Trump. While business owners can use losses to avoid taxes, they can do so only up to the amount invested in the business. But by taking personal responsibility for that $421 million in debt, Trump would be able to declare that amount in losses in future years. The balances on those loans had not been paid down by the end of 2018, and the businesses carrying the bulk of that debt, Doral, the hotel in Washington, each good for $100 million plus on that, are struggling, which could make it difficult to find a lender willing to refinance it. But as president, that might be a different story. The unresolved audit of his $72.9 million tax refund hangs over his head. The broader economy promises little relief. Across the country, brick and mortar stores are also in decline, and they have been very important to Trump Tower, which has in turn been very important to Trump. Nike, which rented the space for its flagship store in a building attached to Trump Tower and had paid $195.1 million in rent since the 90s, left in 2018. The president's most recent financial disclosure reported modest gains in 2019, but that was before the pandemic hit. His already struggling properties were shut down for several months earlier this year. The Doral Resort asked Deutsche Bank, amazingly enough, to allow a delay on its loan payments, Analysts have predicted that the hotel business will not fully recover until late 2023. Mr. Trump still has assets to sell, but doing so could take its own toll, both financial and to Mr. Trump's desire to always be seen as a winner. The Trump family said last year that it was considering selling the Washington hotel, but not because it was losing money. In Mr. Trump's telling, any difficulty in his finances has been caused by the sacrifices made for his current job. They say Trump is getting rich off our nation, he said at a rally in Minneapolis last October. I lose billions being president, and I don't care. It's nice to be rich, I guess, but I lose billions. And he was losing billions anyway, whether he was president or not. In fact, the only way he can stop losing the last of his billions is to make banks and other lenders feel trepidation about filing bankruptcy proceedings or foreclosure proceedings against the sitting president. And what a vindictive, idiotic sitting president, unbound by and uninterested in the laws of the country, might do to them, and where he might exact retribution if they decided to to follow through on the debts he owes like they would with any other debtor. So that may be his only way of staying afloat. All right. Well, headed into our second break at the top of the hour, and we are finished at last with this article. I will comment here briefly. One of the other things I saw floating around on Twitter this morning, what's his name? One of the guys who's a writer or something behind the Apprentice, who's been a constant critic of Trump throughout his presidency and telling everybody what used to go on set at The Apprentice. Just noting for the record that back in the day, they had to actually buy new furniture in the first season to make it look like he was really rich. I thought that was kind of funny. All right, welcome back again to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Into our second hour. Now, like I said, there's probably another hour and a half that we could do reading through the second installment, but perhaps we'll change our focus in our second hour because we'll want to talk to Joan later on in the show, and we'll just end up dropping this Trump thing in the middle. So, and perhaps maybe you all couldn't wait and you went ahead and read it, but there'll be time to handle it during the rest of the week, I'm sure. But yeah, this one does start out actually on The Apprentice, and so I thought it was maybe that's a good transition where I found that tweet I was thinking of. It's Noel Casler, Casler, who tweets as Casler Noel, if you want to look it up. But he's a comedian, and I guess was employed, as I recall his story over the years, as a writer of some kind. You might think, why does a reality show need a writer? Of course, there wasn't much reality going on in there. And early on even before the Trump presidency, I think we spent a lot of time. I love referring back to the time that we read the story in one of the trade magazines, The Editors, on the first couple seasons of The Apprentice, outlining how it was not entirely clear before the first season aired what kind of show this was going to be, and that the entire cast, the entire crew, maybe including producer Mark Burnett, thought up to almost the last minute before airing the first pilots and first shows of The Apprentice, thought that they might be working on a comedy, that they were documenting the foibles of a, bouffanted idiot who thought he was a genius businessman, and it was hilarious to everybody how much time and effort he put into puffing himself up, that this was the comic relief, and that behind the scenes, we were going to take a behind the scenes look at how this buffoon had managed to convince the world that he was a titanic businessman, but was in fact the impulsive moron who wasted his money on everything. But then, I don't know whether Burnett originally planned it this way, but the news was late in getting to the editors. No. You're not working on a comedy about an idiot who pretends he's a businessman. We are editing this into a different shape. We're going to do whatever we have to do to make it look like he really is truly an actual business genius, an impresario running multiple, entertainment and luxury luxury style brands around the world. And he really is a genius, and he has this certain business and marketing genius to impart to the contestants on this stupid show. And the editors were complaining that, they just didn't have the footage to show that he was a smart person. But they were forced to turn, as a comedy, it was writing itself. As a, reality show about a genius businessman, it was a serious challenge. Anyway, I guess Noel must have been one of the guys that they brought in to try and write something out based on the footage that they had and based on whatever they could plan on shooting in a reality show, how to turn this into a script for something serious. Anyway, he's always got comments about Trump's use of racist language on the sets and drugs on the sets, and it's really kind of amazing. But, I guess because he's a comedian and he was involved in this television show, people are not, generally speaking, taking him terribly seriously. But he doesn't say anything that's out of keeping with what we all suspect about how Trump behaved on set anyway. But this particular tweet struck me today. So Mark Burnett, he says, knew that Trump was broke, and production had to rent office furniture to make him look wealthy on season 1 of The Apprentice because the Trump Organization office was so ratty. There's a second part to this tweet, just one sentence I'll get to in a second. But here, again, from the outside, remember, looking in, the rest of us, is Trump a billionaire? Well, yes, look at this gleaming golden tower that he bases his business in. Inside, where you can't go, where the actual Trump Organization offices are anyway, inside you can go to the shopping plaza inside, and they keep that up to look like it's ritzy, I guess, even if their idea of ritzy is disgusting. But the Trump Organization offices were ratty dumps that, it didn't really matter because the only people who saw it were family members who, I guess, knew what the situation was or had just become, it might be that the kids have no idea what the hell's going on. They just think this is how it is. We have billions of dollars. Why don't we have better furniture? I don't know. We just don't, but everything I ever wanted I could buy. So what the hell's the difference to me? But here Trump is like, where, there's no public facing portion of the Trump Organization offices, or if there are, I suppose they look a little bit different. The rest of the Trump Organization office looks terrible. So in comes the production department buying furniture and renting office furniture, in fact, so that he would look like the character they were trying to turn him into on the show. The second part of this tweet that was interesting and surprising was all the kids, that would be Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, and I don't know whether Tiffany had access to the set. Barron was not born yet, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, all the kids would ask for per diems on set, not your typical billionaire moves. True. So they wanted to be paid for, they love to get paid for everything. And maybe their father said, you get paid for whatever you do. You ask them for money. But it's not so much a lesson in how to always be extracting from everything so that you can maintain your billionaire status, as if you want cash, you're going to have to get it from NBC. They're the ones who have cash. We don't. I thought that was pretty interesting. Anyway, let's see. So we won't dive into part 2 on the air because there's so many other things that we need to point out and try and figure out. I thought I would switch back to that pandemic that's happening again, even though we could wait for that for Wednesday when we're talking with Greg about it. But a couple of developments on the coronavirus front that we used to keep up with and haven't been. As a result, we've fallen, behind on these things. Let's see. Coronavirus-related stuff includes this brief piece from The Hill that warns us just exactly what we didn't want to hear. Coronavirus mutation emerges that may outmaneuver mask wearing and hand washing. That's too bad because it comes on the heels of another story, if I can find it tucked away in pocket here, that suggested that mask wearing was doing a tremendous job in possibly, this was the theory, in helping limit the spread of COVID manifestations that were particularly deadly, I guess we could say. The Telegraph in the UK put this word out. We'll start with them and then switch back to the bad news. The Telegraph reporting, at least in part here, face masks could be giving people COVID-19 immunity, researchers suggest. And I don't want to suggest here that put on a mask and no matter what happens or where you go, you can't get it. But it does help. But what do they mean by immunity? Well, mask wearing might also be reducing, they say, the severity of the virus and ensuring that a greater proportion of new infections are asymptomatic. Here's their best attempt at explaining how. Georgina Hayes writes for, again, the Telegraph, face masks may be inadvertently, and is it really inadvertent? We're doing this on purpose, giving people COVID-19 immunity and making them get less sick from the virus, academics have suggested in one of the most respected medical journals in the world. The commentary published in the New England Journal of Medicine, this write-up, of course, having been published in Old England, but here, the New England Journal of Medicine, you're all aware of it, advances the unproven but promising theory that universal mask wearing might be helping to reduce the severity of the virus and ensuring that a greater proportion of new infections are asymptomatic. They're troublesome in terms of getting people to realize that they're sick and to stay home, but that's why we're supposed to be, limiting our contact with one another, because you never know. But still, asymptomatic for the individual that has it, better. They're not feeling terrible. That's good news. Much more worrisome even initially than people dying from the virus was people being knocked out from work and millions of people having to stay home from work before we did the quarantine thing just because they were too sick to go. So at least we have that. And now that we're all working at home, if you're not knocked off your feet by the virus, even if you have it, and if you can function and work from home, great. So much the better. Good for the economy, good for you. If this hypothesis is borne out, the academics argue, then universal mask wearing could become a form of variolation, which they then explain parenthetically afterwards. They say, well, that's like inoculation, and that would generate immunity and thereby slow the spread of the virus in the United States and elsewhere, as the world awaits a vaccine. Well, we haven't exactly seen a slowing of the virus in the United States and elsewhere around the world. Although, if you watch the numbers day to day and you trust the numbers that you're watching, I guess you could make that argument that things are slowing a bit. We were for a while threatening to escalate above 75,000 new cases a day and on our way to 100,000. Fauci was worried that we were going to hit 100,000, and it's come down since then. Not for India. India continues to hover in the 80,000s, but they did break 90,000 at one point and looked to be headed to 100,000 a day and haven't made it. But stabilizing at 80,000 a day isn't great. Neither is our stabilizing in the 30 to 40,000 a day range, but it's better than 100,000. And I think there's occasionally indications of a slight decrease in the rate of increase that's going on in the United States, and you wonder about what might be driving that. Here's the theory. So, it comes as increasing evidence suggests that the amount of virus someone is exposed to at the start of infection, the infectious dose, may determine the severity of their illness. Indeed, a large study published in The Lancet last month found that viral load at diagnosis was an independent predictor of mortality in hospital patients. Wearing masks could, therefore, reduce the infectious dose that the wearer is exposed to and subsequently impact the impact of the disease, as masks filter out some of the virus-containing droplets. If this theory bears out, researchers argue, then population-wide mask wearing might ensure that a higher proportion of COVID-19 infections are asymptomatic. Better still, as data has emerged in recent weeks suggesting that there can be a strong immune response from even mild or asymptomatic coronavirus infection, researchers say that any public health strategy that helps reduce the severity of the virus, such as mask wearing, should increase population-wide immunity as well. This is because even a low viral load can be enough to induce an immune response, which is effectively what a typical vaccine does. While this hypothesis needs to be backed up with more clinical study, experiments in hamsters, yes, hamsters, have hinted at a connection between dose and disease. Earlier this year, a team of researchers in China found that hamsters housed behind a barrier made of surgical masks were less likely to get infected by the coronavirus, and those who did contract the virus became less sick than other animals without masks to protect them. Some observations found in humans seem to support this as well. In a coronavirus outbreak in a closed Argentinian cruise ship, for example, where passengers were provided with surgical masks and staff with N95 masks, the rate of asymptomatic infection was 81%, compared with 20% in an earlier cruise ship outbreak without universal masking. Still, Dr. Monica Gandhi, an infectious disease physician at the University of California, San Francisco, and one of the paper's authors, has stressed that the commentary has its limitations and should not be construed as anything other than a theory. To test the variolation hypothesis, we will need more studies comparing the strength and durability of SARS-CoV-2 specific T-cell immunity between people with asymptomatic infection and those with symptomatic infection, as well as a demonstration of the natural slowing of SARS-CoV-2 spread in areas with a high proportion of asymptomatic infections, she told the Sunday Telegraph. However, it is true that the proportion of asymptomatic infection being increased by masking might increase the proportion of the population who achieve at least short-term immunity to the virus while we await a vaccine. Dr. Julian Tang, Honorary Associate Professor of Respiratory Sciences at the University of Leicester, has shared Dr. Gandhi's cautious optimism. This idea of variolation, the term originally derived from the smallpox pre-vaccine era, is quite feasible and may add to the protective physical effects of universal masking by low-level stimulation of the wearer's immune system as it is exposed to low levels of airborne SARS-CoV-2, which can induce an immune response, but without any overt infection and disease, she said. She added, this is, after all, the response to a typical vaccine, where the recipient's immune system is stimulated subclinically to produce protective immune responses to combat the infection if exposed at a future date. Of course, formal studies are required to confirm this effect, and there are likely natural experiments going on around the world at the moment. So, that would be great, right? We'll see whether that sticks, but again, just a theory. At the same time, we have the less than pleasing news, as I mentioned, from the Hill. Coronavirus mutation emerges that may outmaneuver mask wearing and hand washing. So a little bit of both here. Scientists in Houston analyzed more than 5,000 genetic sequences of the coronavirus, reports Joseph Guzman for the Hill. We'll do the should we jump right in? It doesn't look like it's that long. There's story at a glance, bullet points, and then there's just the story. A new preliminary study involving more than 5,000 genetic sequences of the coronavirus suggests one of the virus's many mutations, at least one anyway, may be more contagious than the others. I think we could expect that. This, according to a report in the Washington Post, which I guess tells us where they purloined this from. The Post's entry was entitled, Massive Genetic Study Shows Coronavirus Mutating and Potentially Evolving Amid Rapid U.S. Spread. We'll stick with the Hill's shorter, I think, summation of what happened there. The study, which has not been peer-reviewed, something to keep in mind, and was conducted by researchers from Houston Methodist Hospital, found the strain known as D614G mutation was responsible for close to every coronavirus infection in Houston this summer, during Texas's second wave, as they're calling it, of infections. The mutation did not make the virus deadlier or change clinical outcomes, according to researchers. That's good. All viruses mutate, and most of the random changes to the genetic sequence are considered to be insignificant. However, researchers found people infected with this particular strain had higher viral loads in their upper respiratory tracts, allowing the virus to potentially spread more effectively. David Morens, a virologist at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Fauci's shop, who reviewed the study, told the Post that the findings suggest the virus may have become more contagious and could possibly be responding to health measures such as social distancing and mask wearing. I don't know if it can defeat social distancing. Virus can only travel as far as the aerosol goes, but okay, whatever. Wearing masks, washing our hands, all the things that are barriers to transmissibility or contagion. But as the virus becomes more contagious, it statistically is better at getting around those barriers. That's what Morens told the paper, cautioning not to overinterpret the findings from a single study that is yet to be peer-reviewed. He also said it's possible the virus could eventually get around immunity when a vaccine is rolled out, similar to the flu. Although we don't know yet, it's well within the realm of possibility that this coronavirus, when our population-level immunity gets high enough, that this coronavirus will find a way to get around our immunity, he said. We'll have to chase the virus, and as it mutates, we'll have to tinker with our vaccine. Again, there people will be right when they say it's the flu. It needs to be treated, perhaps, like the flu when it comes to vaccination. The research is the latest in the series of studies suggesting the D614G mutation is more contagious than earlier versions of the original virus. The mutation has been dominant in almost all places in the U.S., Europe, and Latin America. A report last month claimed the mutation may be more infectious but less deadly than the original virus, and it has been associated with lower death rates. But other researchers said the conclusion that the mutation is more contagious than others is premature. How about the less deadly part? The study provides more evidence for what we already know about this mutation, that it's the most common variant. Emma Hodcraft, a geneticist at the Next Strain Project, told Business Insider. That doesn't mean the virus is effectively mutating. Hodcraft said her team of researchers that has been tracing the coronavirus's genetic changes have yet to identify a mutation that would change how infectious or deadly the virus is, according to Business Insider. Okay, so quicker summation, if not necessarily as good at explaining what was happening here. But I guess generally speaking, it comports with what we've been seeing in terms of the numbers, that the initial wave, particularly that hit Italy and Spain and France in Europe, produced just much higher death rates. It was certainly very infectious, and now we may be finding that this one is even more infectious but less deadly, so that there are 7-point-something now million people in the United States documented as having tested positive, and probably many millions more that have not been found positive according to tests. Testing has never reached them, but dying at lower rates. So I guess that helps explain the very stupid refrain that we hear about the Florida infections. Where are the deaths? So, it's not proof that it's a hoax and that nobody in Florida is getting it. It would tend to prove the theory that perhaps what's circulating in the United States and in Florida in particular, now that they are back to 100% capacity in bars and restaurants, thanks to their idiot governor, lots more people will become infected, but they won't die at the rate they were dying in Italy. And I guess that's good news. But, of course, there are plenty of elderly folks in Florida to start with. And, they are getting hit. And, by the way, they are catching up on those deaths. I've been watching them slowly climb up the ranks in deaths per million in the world meters. For a long time, they lingered below the national average, and then they surpassed the national average, and then they've been rocketing since then up towards the top 10. And it won't take too long for them to start showing up in our top 10 lists that I tweet out each day. Okay, let's see. What else have we got to add to things here? Oh, coming up not too far from our next break, and the opportunity at least to speak with Joan. So we'll keep that in mind as well. What else might we cram in before switching over. There was at least one other coronavirus-related headline that I could share with you. Boy, there was also some very good documentation over in Slate magazine, just sort of all compiled in one place. And it's worth reading at some point, but perhaps we'll take a slightly different tack in getting to it. But over at Slate, William Salatin, do I have his pronunciation of his last name correct? I see his name passing on Twitter, and don't bother pronouncing it out loud. But the Trump pandemic is the piece he put together at Slate, which is described in the subheader as a blow-by-blow account of how the president killed thousands of Americans, and I'm in agreement with his assessment here. And it's an older piece, actually, August 9th, 2020, and yet it rings just as true today, over a month and a half later. But sort of a shocking litany, even if you were, and you have to be at this point, aware of just how many opportunities to do something positive to mitigate the damage of the virus he had and didn't take. So another one of those pieces, if you're looking to justify, let's say, tweeting that history will one day demand to know why we didn't hang Trump, you can point to this collection of facts, and people will probably say, yeah, well, it's a good question. Why didn't we hang Trump? And is there still time? All right. Another coronavirus mention in a headline that takes us in a slightly different direction, and that's a good thing to do just before our break. From the Mountain State Spotlight, Mountain State in this case being West Virginia, a big opioid trial looms in West Virginia. The firms being sued are getting huge COVID-19 contracts from the Trump administration. It's an interesting confluence of stories there by Eric Eyre. I'm hoping that's the right pronunciation of E-Y-R-E. Since the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, President Donald Trump's administration has been, got to get rid of this pop-up here, has been heaping praise and awarding contracts to prescription drug distributors that are being accused, at the same time, of fueling the opioid crisis. Well, that's going to happen when you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies. Last month, the president tapped McKesson Corporation as the nationwide distributor for a potential COVID-19 vaccine. In late March, Trump called McKesson a great company, which, he usually does, during a White House press conference that included the CEO of McKesson and another wholesale drug distributor, Cardinal Health. Soon after, the Trump administration selected drug distribution giant AmerisourceBergen for a federal contract that gives the company exclusive rights to deliver remdesivir, which the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved in April as an emergency treatment for seriously ill patients, and hydroxychloroquine, interestingly enough, which the FDA revoked emergency approval for and warned of cardiac side effects with that drug. By the way, happened to see something over the weekend. There's the tweet, as a matter of fact, the tweet of one Larry Levitt. I'm not certain who Larry is, but he made this interesting observation. He says, I was just looking through an insurance underwriting manual from before the Affordable Care Act. You know what would have gotten you denied individual insurance? Something that would have landed you on the category of having pre-existing conditions. I guess not so much the condition, but they used to have a list, the insurance companies did, of if you're taking these pharmaceutical drugs that are apparently indicative enough of risk that you could be denied insurance as possibly having a pre-existing condition. This would be a list of, of drugs that if you were honest and told insurance companies you had taken or were taking, you could be denied insurance. Hydroxychloroquine in the past 12 months when you're applying for insurance will get you declined as probably having a pre-existing condition, whether that condition is malaria or anything else. Yeah, it says right here, deny if applicant is taking or has taken any of the following medications in the last 12 months. And there's hydroxychloroquine right on the list. So one of those things that the president is recommending very strongly that would, as he does everything very strongly, of course. But if you took his advice and he was successful in his litigation to kill the Affordable Care Act and take with it the protections for pre-existing conditions. If you took his advice on hydroxychloroquine, you're not getting any insurance about anything anytime soon. Of course, now that he's signed a quote-unquote executive order making it policy, whatever that means, to protect people with pre-existing conditions, I'm sure your troubles are over. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and Joan McCarter is with us. And I started off by making the mistake of asking her whether she was ready for the debate, and then I don't know, I think she dropped dead. That was it. So she groaned. She's alive. Everything's fine. But is that going to be your task tonight, or someone else going to cover?
We're splitting it.
Okay, so it's not as bad
between Mark and I. I'll take the first. Mark and me.
Okay.
I was just thinking about it this morning, and there I messed it up. I'll have the first half. Mark will have the second half, because it's only, when you're dealing with Trump, it's really only fair to share the load.
Yes, I think that's true, and there's no point in necessarily trying to keep up with every particular lie. There are professionals out there who have to do that as well. But yeah, okay. And I was thinking, at this point, the best way of dealing with a Trump debate is noting the most egregious stuff that, it's still fun to note and say, look at how dumb this is. And then just throwing it open and saying, you're smart people. You know what you saw. Come here and discuss it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way for Biden to handle it. Just say, oh, yeah, there's another lie, and then move on to his talking point.
Yeah.
Because
I
don't know what else you do.
Yeah.
I do like Bette Midler's suggestion.
Oh? What was that?
Every time a question comes up for Biden, well, that's a $750 question, isn't it?
That's a good way of putting it. I'll take that.
Preface every answer with that.
Right. And why not? That was his answer 2 years in a row, and this could be the answer for everything as well. And it would poke fun at him, and I don't know. Would it ever get old? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Well, it's worth trying. I'm sure he's probably, I don't know whether I would necessarily advise him to spend any time honing zingers, as it were, because the chances that they'll come out as dad jokes is pretty high, but still, that might be all that's necessary, is to just say, well, that's a lie, and everybody knows it. You know it.
Yeah.
I like Bob Dole's suggestion. Take Bob Dole's line. You know it. I know it. The American people know it. That's the way he used to say things like that. But all you have to do is point out that it's a lie. And you know what? Even if it's not a lie, you could probably get away with it. And people would probably believe that it was a lie. Trump's people won't. And there's nothing you can do about that. And who cares? And they might not even be watching anyway. So, all right. Well, as long as you don't have to do it solo, that's good news. That leaves you plenty of time to figure out, for instance, whether the government's going to shut down on Thursday at this point.
Yes, or midnight tomorrow.
Yes, right. Well, yeah, okay. So technically, the very first minute of Thursday.
Yes.
October 1st.
Looks as though, in between rushing Amy Coney Barrett around on the House or the Senate side of things, that Mitch McConnell will get the bill onto the floor They're taking a procedural vote supposedly today.
Okay.
30 hours debate. They pass it tomorrow.
Okay. All right, so there's something prepared.
They couldn't have done it before they left for 4 days last week. But
No.
Anyway,
this adds
it'll
excitement
happen.
and urgency, and they feel like they're mitigating an emergency and swooping in at the last. I don't know why they choose to do it that way, but it's fairly common. So, but there's a.
I don't know. Maybe they think that there's less opportunity for Rand Paul to do something.
That could be. They have to hear less about
to
it. To
derail it all if they don't give him the opportunity by doing it all at the last minute. I don't know.
It's as good a guess as any.
Know.
I mean, but then there's pressure on him. Like, I know you're going to try and screw things up, but it can't be in the form of amendments that stretch this out for another day or two because we don't have another day or two. And at heart, he's generally speaking kind of a chicken, and the idea of laying the shutdown at this point in the middle of a pandemic at his feet is probably too much for him. There might be other years in which he was willing to do that. That's a good guess, I think. I think their games pretty well at this point. What sort of any surprises that either ordinarily wouldn't be in such a bill, or did they keep it relatively clean? Or
they kept it relatively clean. They did one important thing, a tiny bit of coronavirus relief, which is extending food aid programs from the CARES Act.
Okay.
So there is money to help people eat. There's at least that.
That's good.
And a good chunk of money, $8 billion in nutrition funding for children and families, including expanding or carrying on the extension of the school lunch program and making it applicable also now to child care centers and to families whose children would be in child care centers but aren't because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, we'll
hopefully all the states take it up. Idaho was one of the states that decided first round it wasn't going to for I don't know what reason. Hungry children are okay with Republican leadership in Idaho.
I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Yes. There's probably people who said, I'm hungry right now.
It also includes a $30 billion line of credit. Sort of just, it's not really new money appropriated, but it extends money that's there already for payments to farmers. And this was an interesting thing that I found out last week that I didn't know about. The Trump administration was actually proposing to take money from the Commodity Credit Corporation that provides sort of stabilization to farmers and ranchers.
Yes.
And give it to the oil companies.
Oil companies? Oh.
Because something ethanol.
Sure, why not?
If oil companies didn't produce enough ethanol to get their credits for that, then they could offset what they lost through not doing ethanol from the Commodity Credit Corporation funds, which only the Trump administration could cook up.
Huh. I'm not even certain I understand what just happened there, but okay.
I'm not either. But at any rate, the bill says, no, you can't do that. No, none of this money can go to oil companies. So,
all right, well, that
loophole's closed.
That's nice. That's a simple solution to a complicated thing they tried to cook up, I guess. But yeah, it's not where the money belongs at this stage of the game, or ever really, but certainly not this money. Okay, so some additional relief, and that is good. How long will they be kicking the can down the road? How far?
Oh well, this is what's really kind of a scary thing. December 11th. December
11th. Okay. All right. So we're right back, and lame ducks will have to take care of it. Now it has to be done by a lame duck Congress.
It has to be done by a lame duck. It might be being done by a House that's completely embroiled in a Donald Trump challenge.
Yeah.
To the election.
That's true too. December 11th. By that time, is that before? What's Safe Harbor Day now? Not Pearl Harbor Day. Safe Harbor Day. Pearl Harbor was not safe, as it turns out. Do we know?
I am not sure.
Yeah, I think it's a hard date and unchanged, and it might be December 20th. I want to say, but I didn't pay that much attention to that portion of the legislation. By that point, it was like the last time anybody talked about the safe harbor date was 2000, I guess. And although it happened again with some of the faithless elector possibilities when members of the Electoral College, who I guess still took the thing seriously, said, "Oh my God, Donald Trump could be elected." But somewhere around there, so they might have to do it before Safe Harbor Day, which is where
December 8th.
Oh, that's worse.
I just looked it up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking about 20th.
The safe harbor.
I can't. It's the best explanation I think that I can give you off the top of my head for it is that's the date by which the states and their various mechanisms, whatever they may be, it's usually voting and then counting the votes, but I don't know what's going to be this time. The date by which the states have to certify and put down on paper, here is who gets the electoral votes from our state and mail it to Mike Pence, to the president of the Senate for counting later on. Now, I think that's the point at which everything has to be counted up and decided anyway. I don't know whether that's when everything's certified. Okay. And maybe December 20th is when everything has to be signed. Good. A real answer.
So, the date set in stone for the Electoral College to decide is the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December.
That's the 8th. Or about the...
That's the 15th. That's when the Electoral College says, okay,
what's the date?
We're deciding. Which means that the states have to do their bit 6 days before the Electoral College. So what's set in stone for the states is 6 days before the Electoral College does this, 6 days before the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December.
Okay.
The states have to have their... So that is December 8th.
December 8th is when the states have to have their slates done.
And they choose their electors.
Okay, and then on the Monday,
and
Wednesday,
then on
Friday
the 11th,
thing,
they have to pass a continuing resolution, and then on the 14th, the Electoral College votes.
Okay, so the CR has to be done before the House would get any sort of deadlocked or otherwise screwed up Electoral College vote. They don't count that in the House until January when the new House is sworn in. But by that point, we'll all see it coming. The states will have said, here's what our final answer is going to be, verifying what we, I guess, by that point will have heard on the news about who's won each state. And I guess where the problem arises is the news people say it looks like Biden has won this state, and then there are legal challenges and things change, and they have until Safe Harbor Day to settle all of that so that the state legislatures and governors know what they're sending forward, because in 6 days, the Electoral College has to meet and vote. All right.
Right.
So in between,
and if they if it ends up being thrown to the House, does that happen in January with the new House, or does that happen with the lame duck House?
It should happen in January with the new House. That's when they will officially open all those things and count them up. But again...
Which brings us to another problem.
Yeah. What?
A House that is governed by the majority Democrats.
Yeah.
But which has a majority of Republican state delegations.
Yes. That is bad.
There are 26 Republican delegations, 22 Democratic, and, a half dozen that are just on the edge.
Yeah.
Either Republican control or Democratic control.
Right. Yeah. So we've
So we
heard
could,
that one.
I mean, it's possible that we end up with a Democratic majority House giving the election to Donald Trump because Republicans have more state delegations.
Yeah. Now that balance may change somewhat, and I think somebody actually went through and identified some of the states where we're right on the cusp of either
In fact,
tying them.
I did that.
Aha, somebody I know must have done that. As a matter of fact. Yeah, okay, great. I don't think
With
I
a
could
little
put
help
my...
from
Excellent.
stories that were already out there.
Yeah, all right, good. My usual MO is, I read this somewhere. I can't remember where. And okay, I'm glad you're here because you can tell us who wrote it, because you did. But yeah, there are states that are on the cusp, or that you could, if you win a seat or two, could tie it up so that the vote was essentially tied. I don't know what the hell you do with that. I guess they just fight. And do you have to cast a vote from your delegation, or do you abstain because you can't? I don't know what you do.
I don't know if you can abstain.
I mean, I don't think anybody wants
Something
to.
we have to figure out by next Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we'll try and figure that out, and so we can discuss it and give the answer. But yeah, it may be that they don't abstain per se, but they just cannot come to a conclusion. But I don't know if there's any mechanism to try to force something, and I don't know how you get somebody to change sides on that such that your state can cast a vote. I have no idea.
Unless
they're
there's
conservatives.
the problem of Pennsylvania.
Okay, are they
which
closely tied?
Right now is tied.
All right. Yeah, you can't not have their vote.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess conservatives.
Then there's
maybe.
Michigan.
Them too.
Yeah. 7
How long
Democrats.
ago did you do this? When was this
6
story
Republicans and Justin Amish, who is retiring.
Oh, so he won't be
and
there.
And that's likely to go Republican. So
yeah.
Pennsylvania and Michigan could both be tied in terms of their delegation.
Yeah, now their vote
and
in
a lot of these, this was part of the problem of 2018. We did a great job getting Democrats into some Republican seats and flipping seats.
Yeah.
But that means that they're still quite vulnerable, those Democratic freshmen in swing states.
I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. That's what you're trying to do, regardless. But yeah, so they need to hold those seats.
Arizona is tight. Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, Florida. Florida has a 1-seat Republican advantage.
Oh.
So, it's not like these are really important states.
Yeah. Although it is interesting because we think of them in terms of their electoral vote value, and here they're just one vote. One.
It's just one vote.
So it doesn't really matter that it's interesting to think about taking these enormous electoral college powerhouses out of the voting, but they're just, one single vote just like any other if they can't settle anything. Although Florida, didn't they just have a guy resign now? He was retiring, but he just said, to hell with this, I'm leaving now. He wouldn't have been there anyway. But, I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter for the new Congress, which is the one who'll be doing these votes. When did you write that story of the survey of?
Yesterday, last night.
Oh, no wonder. Okay. I didn't see that at all.
There are 2 potential flips, straight out flips for which would be helpful. And handily, there's just one in each delegation.
Okay.
Alaska and Montana, they have at-large members because their population isn't big enough to have more than one person in the House.
They're at-large because they're not that large.
And it's not out of the realm of possibility that those flip to Democrats.
Okay. Well, we should try and make that happen. That's important always, but this is a particularly good reason for doing it. And I think everybody's kind of familiar in passing from civics and other discussions about how that procedure goes. But each state getting that one vote, and the delegation, I guess, gets together. And I would really be fascinated to see. I can only picture, back in, the ancient days, when things were weird, people switching sides. I can't believe anybody would switch to the other party just to undeadlock their state's delegation. But I guess anything can happen, and if anything was to happen, it would likely be a conservadem somewhere saying, all right, fine, just so that we're not left out of the count and our state isn't unrepresented in this momentous vote. And also I'm running for governor of that state next year or something like that.
Yeah.
I said, well, country before party, I said. I guess that could happen. Well, I hope not. But
it's all rather disturbing to think about.
Yes, it would be. And great study in, how our democracy has kind of fallen apart under Republican gerrymandering and manipulation, that a majority Democratic House would nonetheless deliver us a Republican president, Donald Trump in particular, and how, his electoral college map that he'll point to. Look at all this red that's filled with nobody in many of these spaces. Land doesn't vote, but it looks like it does on the map. And guess what else looks like it? The House of Representatives, all the Democrats. I wonder if he would say I was elected on a bipartisan basis. The majority House Democrats voted for me. They didn't, not a single one, but you won anyway. Yeah. Well, we got problems, and it might be worth reevaluating how we do things. The Electoral College on its last legs.
Is it likely? I don't know. I mean, is there going to be an Electoral College tie? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if Trump can go to court with Amy Coney Barrett on it and throw out the results in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Florida.
Right. Such that nobody has the 270 that you need. Not a tie, but nobody's got the 270.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then.
Same thing.
Then here we go.
It's a strategy, and a lot of people are worried that that's the one he's pursuing. And in some cases, depending on how close the Electoral College is, it might only take litigating one state that really does have a large number of Electoral College votes. And that's where it would become important. Oh, the foreign press is going to love this. Wait a minute, I thought the Electoral College meant that this state was worth a lot. Yeah, well, not now. At this stage, it's only worth 1 point.
It used to be, but now it has one vote.
Right. What? Why? How? I don't know. Wisdom of the founders, I guess. So, back in those days, people, did change their minds about things like that and try to come to an accommodation in a delegation. Back in the Continental Congress days, they worked that way. States voting as a delegation, and people fought and figured it out. Of course, then...
Not to inject more angst into this whole discussion.
I will allow it. Go ahead, please.
But you know what Amy Coney Barrett was doing when she was in Florida?
When was she in Florida?
2000.
Now I have an idea of what you...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She was on the Bush legal team
in
Florida in 2000.
Oh, well, that's what happened to that Bush legal team in 2000. They all got installed in the federal judiciary because... And
now on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, wow. Well, that'll make two.
Too.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that would make two of them. Well, isn't that great? They could sign each other's yearbooks.
Which is probably, well, I don't know. I'm projecting. I'm thinking that's probably why Barrett got the nod over Lagoa, who would have helped Trump probably in Florida.
That's
as a nominee.
What, was she somehow not on board with the Florida result? She's from Florida, but
she's from Florida and probably would have helped electorally in Florida, but maybe Trump wanted to just make sure he nailed down the evangelicals, or maybe he thought two people who had this experience on the Bush legal team in Florida in 2000 would be handy to have on the court.
They would be. Ordinarily, they'd have to recuse, but not now. That would be interesting. If the only precedent you had for considering this case was one that you argued as a partisan attorney, normally you'd say that you should probably not take part in that decision. But now they'll just say, you know what? I am convinced that I was right then, and I did everything correctly, and that's the way this outcome has to be too. Well,
she's not going to recuse. I mean,
no.
Had Amy Coney Barrett the kind of character to say she would recuse from any election kind of decision making, she wouldn't take the job right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess
a person of real character who is deserving of sitting on the Supreme Court would say, not now. Wait until next year. These are not the right circumstances for me to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to turn down the top job in your legal profession, I suppose, but people other than her would likely do that and say, I don't, because it's the top job and it lasts for a lifetime, I would rather that there be no cloud, no asterisk, as it were, with my name. And I'm pretty sure that I would be confirmed by a different president because of how great I am. And I don't know. I guess she just doesn't believe that, but all right, so she'll take the job. I remember when various schemes were being hatched to try and get Merrick Garland through. There were a lot of people that said, well, Merrick Garland has too much integrity to accept the nomination under such circumstances. If the Democrats were to somehow pull some kind of crazy maneuver, he wants to be confirmed the normal way. And, of course, Republicans said that he wouldn't accept it. And now that it's their turn to grab it, of course we'll take it. You bet. You'd have to be an idiot to...
Gimme.
Yeah. So, all right, they're taking that. And, we're watching and waiting and hoping that the Democrats say they will slow down the processes in the Senate to some extent. And although that by itself won't prevent her confirmation, since you don't need to get past the filibuster, I'm still of the belief that you slow everything down anyway and just, hey, you don't know what's going to happen. Brad Parscale's in a mental hospital right now. He didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So
I would really very much like to see them slow it down.
Yeah.
I think Democrats should be doing everything in their power. Democrats, apparently, not all of them are behind that. Schumer started trying to make sort of a stab at it last week.
Yeah. And they did,
but I don't think he got everybody on board and saying they would do it.
Well, it only takes one person for the most part. They're not asking him to cast any votes on anything, really.
No, it's just hanging out on the floor and objecting to unanimous consent and not letting committees meet if they don't meet the 2-hour rule and just engaging Republicans in debate every chance they get. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that one person can do.
Well,
hanging out in the chamber, causing problems.
Yeah. As long as they have a couple of people who are willing to participate in it, it should go fairly well. And there's not that much time left and not many things left that there are even stubborn senators who are going to say, well, we got to have this or that happen, so I object to this idea of objecting to everything. The legislative season is over. Maybe Dianne Feinstein will be unhappy if her committee can't meet or something, but it wasn't going to meet for very long anymore anyway, and it's time for everybody to go home and campaign, and they might take that break. I don't know. But I say delay everything.
Into the mix of all of this, I just have to say, the House is trying again with coronavirus relief.
More on top of what's in the CR?
Pelosi, yes, 2.2 trillion. Pelosi
That's
and Mnuchin have talked every day since the weekend. Again, Mnuchin seems to be trying. The House is going to, they released the bill last night. It's $2.2 trillion. The new stuff in it is money specifically for the restaurant industry and for the airlines. It halves what they had for state and government aid, which, is fine. State and local government aid. So anyway, if Trump decides he really wants to do COVID relief, then that could make the Senate have to do something.
Okay. And I mean, I guess aiming it at restaurants and airlines increases the chance that a passes or makes Trump
because
say
those
the
are
Senate
both
should do it?
bipartisan efforts.
Yeah. All right. Well, at this point, any last stab at injecting money into the economy probably okay, even though I wish the money were going elsewhere. They're not going to get that done with Trump in office. But maybe for airlines and restaurants, and they're going to need it in
Well,
in
and the $1,200 per person and the $600 bump in unemployment benefits. So it's a good bill.
All right.
It's a good bill.
Great. All right.
Not
Well, that's
everything we need, but better than nothing.
So the good stuff that we wanted is in there too, and that's good. They didn't jettison that. And the price of getting it is bailing out airlines and restaurants. They do need it. People do work there. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. And we won't get anything that we like until Biden is president, and you should go out and do everything you can to make sure that happens. So
with a House majority that can
they can make sure it
back
does.
him up.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for that crazy news. We'll be back
From
next
Daily
Tuesday.
Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right. Yes. Well, if you didn't get to hear Joan sign off in the middle of that, she actually did. I know that sort of stomps all over. But thanks, Joan, for coming by as usual. We'll check in next Tuesday with a fully functioning government and everything. And at least we can mop our brow and say that happened. Great. We'll be back tomorrow. Stay tuned for Justice Next.